Victor went to take a shower, leaving his laptop unsecured. As I reached to close it, a reflex born of habit, I noticed his messaging app was still active. My heart gave a small traitorous lurch. Curiosity, that insidious serpent, uncoiled within me. I clicked open a chat window. A contact ominously saved as Mr. Wright had sent a chillingly simple message. I'm pregnant. The world seemed to tilt. Just an hour ago, Victor and I had been finishing dinner. He was ostensibly catching up on work emails, while I, trying to make casual conversation, mentioned our neighbor Lisa, who was going through a rather public and messy divorce. Oh, what happened? Victor had asked, his tone a little too nonchalant, his eyes not leaving his screen. Her husband, old Mr. Roberts, can you even imagine? I'd replied, shaking my head in disapproval. He was sleeping with some college student. Roberts is nearly 50, Victor. Shamelessly carrying on with a girl young enough to be his daughter. I'd warmed to my topic, indignation rising. And these young girls today, honestly, no sense at all. He's practically her father's age. But then she had the audacity to show up at Lisa's door, screaming that they were the ones in true love. As I spoke, I'd registered a fleeting, almost imperceptible tension in Victor's shoulders, a rigidity that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I chuckled inwardly, chiding myself for being overly sensitive. Later, I'd playfully snaked my arms around him, nuzzling his neck. Darling, I'd purred. Lisa was saying today how much she envies me, having such a wonderful, devoted husband like you. Childhood sweethearts through thick and thin. Victor's body had stiffened again, more noticeably this time. Vivian, behave yourself, he'd muttered, pulling away slightly. Undeterred, I'd blown a warm breath into his ear. Sweetheart, Leo is at my parents' tonight. Just the two of us. Victor had abruptly stood up. I'm going to take a shower, he'd announced, almost fleeing the room. His haste felt less like a desire for cleanliness and more like an escape. A cold premonition had snaked its way into my heart. It had been a long time, too long, since Victor and I had shared any real intimacy. Lisa's words from earlier echoed in my mind. When a man starts recoiling from your touch, Vivian, that's a red flag waving furiously over your marriage. I tried to dismiss the thought. We were different, Victor and I. Our bond was deeper, forged in shared childhoods and decades of history. But then again, hadn't everyone at some point believed their marriage was unique and vulnerable? My mind had wandered, lost in these unsettling reflections. When I looked up, Victor's laptop screen was still glowing. My hand moved automatically to close it, and that's when I saw the active messenger window. That's when Mr. Wright delivered his bombshell. My mind reeled. And then a reply from Victor, who should have been in the shower, unable to respond. Are you serious? Mr. Wright typed back swiftly. Yes. My period is 2 weeks late. I took a test and then I went to the hospital for an ultrasound just now. I'm a little over a month pregnant. It must have been from that time last month when we were together. Victor's reply was a curt, oh. Mr. Wright continued, a saccharine note of martyrdom in her tone. It's okay, really. If you don't want it, I can get rid of it. I wasn't after anything when I got involved with you. I just genuinely like you as a person. I never wanted you to get a divorce. This was unbelievable. Victor typed. That's not what I mean. I'll give you a proper answer, a resolution. Mr. Wright. But I'm afraid that woman will make things difficult for you. Victor. Her? All she has is me. She's completely dependent. What right does she have to make things difficult? If Mr. Wright's words had shattered my perception of reality, Victor's replies were like shards of ice piercing my heart. That woman was undoubtedly me. What had I done to deserve this? For Victor to betray me so profoundly, to create their loved child behind my back. In truth, a part of me had sensed something was amiss for months. A subtle shift in his demeanor, a growing distance. But I hadn't wanted to face it, couldn't bring myself to believe it. Today's chat log, however, dragged me into the harsh, unforgiving light of reality. Victor and I, we were finished. His replies were undeniable proof of his betrayal. The earlier chat history was wiped clean, a clear sign of his habitual deception. My first instinct was to confront him, to unleash the storm of pain and anger raging within me. But a cold, calculating calm settled over me instead. I carefully forwarded the damning exchange to my own phone, then deleted it from his history. Some things required careful planning, especially with our precious son Leo to consider. The thought of Leo's innocent face intensified the ache in my heart, a burning disgust for Victor's actions. Our relationship wasn't just love, it was family, a bond woven from shared history. Don't they say love eventually deepens into familial affection? For us who had grown up side by side, shouldn't our bond have been even stronger, unbreakable? How could Victor do this? His affair wasn't just a betrayal of me, it was a betrayal of my parents, of the love and upbringing they had so generously given him. When Victor emerged from the shower, the first thing he did was check his laptop. Seeing it closed, he asked a little too casually, "Vivian, did you close the laptop?" I feigned drowsiness, my eyes still closed. "Didn't you close it just now?" He let out a sigh of relief. My heart constricted with a pain so sharp it took my breath away. That night Victor slept soundly. I lay awake staring into the darkness, the silence of the room amplifying the turmoil in my soul, until the first gray light of dawn. The next day, after a monumental effort to compose myself, I went to pick up our son Leo from kindergarten. From a distance, Leo spotted me, his little chubby hand waving frantically through the throng of parents and children. He ran towards me, a small, exuberant missile, and burrowed into my arms, his voice sweet as honey. "Mommy, mommy." I hugged him tightly. "Leo, sweetie, you need to run a little slower. You'll fall and scrape your knees and then you'll be crying." He pulled back slightly, still clinging to my hand, pouting adorably. "But I just missed you so much, mommy." Then his face fell a little. "Where's Daddy?" "Daddy's at work, honey." "He's very busy," I replied, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Leo's disappointment was palpable. "Daddy's always busy. Does he even remember it's my birthday today?" Looking at his small, innocent face, my heart ached even more. He was so young. How would he cope with his father's absence, with the truth of his father's disloyalty? If he knew his father was a cheat, a betrayer, how deeply would it wound him? I was lost in my own bleak thoughts when Leo's tugging brought me back. "Mommy, mommy. Miss Hall is talking to you." I blinked, focusing on the woman standing before me. It was Chloe Hall, Leo's kindergarten intern teacher. She was, I'd been told, working on her university thesis, gaining practical experience. Before Leo had started, I'd heard she came from a cultured family and was impeccably polite. "I'm so sorry, Miss Hall," I said, embarrassed. "What were you saying?" She looked at me, not a trace of impatience in her expression, and repeated, "Mrs. Price, Leo was wonderful today. He proactively helped his deskmate distribute the lunch snacks. He did a great job." I ruffled Leo's hair. "That's my boy. So helpful." Leo beamed up at me. "Miss Hall always tells us to help other children." "And did you thank Miss Hall?" "Thank you, Miss Hall," Leo chirped, his smile radiant. Chloe smiled back. "Leo is a very bright boy. He remembers things after being told just once." It was only then that I truly looked at Chloe. I'd always known she was pretty, but today she was exceptionally striking. A white cinched waist dress flattered her figure, her long dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her makeup was flawless. She was without a doubt stunning. I knew Chloe was 23 and, as far as I was aware, single. A thought sparked in my mind. "Miss Hall, you look so beautiful today. Are you going on a date?" "Yes, actually," she replied, a small, almost secretive smile playing on her lips. "A candlelight dinner with my boyfriend." Was it my imagination, or did her gaze linger on me for a fraction of a second too long when she mentioned her boyfriend? I mentally chided myself for being paranoid. After bidding Chloe farewell, I turned and led Leo away, completely missing the speculative, almost assessing look Chloe directed at my retreating back. I tried calling Victor several times throughout the afternoon, but his phone went straight to voicemail, turned off. It wasn't until late that evening, after I'd finally managed to lull Leo to sleep, that Victor returned. He tried to embrace me. "Honey, work was crazy. That's why I'm so late." I didn't call him out on his lie. Instead, my voice was cold as I asked, "Do you even remember it was Leo's birthday today?" He slapped his forehead in mock dismay. "Oh, my memory. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to Leo tomorrow, I promise." How about that? A deeper chill settled in my heart. I didn't bother mentioning the countless calls he'd ignored. I knew Victor would likely forget again tomorrow. His heart clearly was no longer in this home. I pushed him away, wrinkling my nose in disgust. "You reek of alcohol. Go take a shower." Later, long after Victor had fallen asleep, I lay wide awake. Earlier, beneath the stale scent of alcohol clinging to him, I detected another fragrance. A light, fresh citrusy note. It was distinctly a woman's perfume. The scent was unique, tantalizingly familiar, but I couldn't quite place where I'd encountered it before. Eventually, I gave up trying to recall it. I never imagined I would identify Victor's mistress so soon, and under such mundane circumstances. It happened at the kindergarten's parent-child sports day. The Following Friday, one of the events, a three-legged race, required a family of 3. Victor, after much cajoling from Leo, had promised we would participate. Due to a misstep, we didn't win. I was busy consoling a tearful Leo. When his sobs finally subsided, I looked up, but Victor was nowhere to be seen. Leo, predictably, started clamoring to find his daddy. As we searched, I rounded a corner just a step ahead of Leo and saw them. Victor and Chloe Hall, locked in an embrace behind a large decorative pillar. My blood ran cold. I quickly steered Leo away, murmuring some excuse about needing a drink. So it was her. No wonder that citrus perfume had smelled so familiar. It was Chloe's signature scent. The one I caught a whiff of every day when I picked Leo up from kindergarten. How utterly vile Victor was. And Chloe equally shameless. They were a disgusting pair. A cold, hard fury settled in my heart. Victor would pay for this. Not just for me but for Leo. My son would not have such a despicable man as a father figure. I called my cousin Ethan. He was the closest thing I had to a brother, especially after my parents passed away. Besides Victor, Ethan had been my rock. I asked him to discreetly investigate Victor. Ethan agreed without hesitation. He'd never liked Victor. A disapproval I'd never fully understood. Even after all these years of my marriage. He'd always been coolly polite to Victor, nothing more. I remembered the eve of my wedding. Ethan had asked me, his eyes searching mine, "Vivian, are you truly happy?" "Of course I am," I'd replied, a little puzzled. I was marrying the man I'd loved for as long as I could remember. He hadn't said anything further to me, but he'd turned to Victor, his voice steely. "You'd better treat my cousin right or you'll answer to me." I'd been moved to tears by his protectiveness. Now, Ethan's past warnings echoed in my mind. He'd once called Victor a wolf in sheep's clothing, one you couldn't tame. I'd laughed it off then, confidently asserting my deeper understanding of Victor. And now that same Victor, the man I thought I knew so intimately, had shattered my trust. It took less than half a day. The sordid photos, the irrefutable stomach-churning proof of his betrayal, landed in my inbox. The woman in the pictures was, as I'd suspected, Chloe Hall. I recalled her composed demeanor, her polite smiles. Was she laughing at my naivety even then? They'd been together for nearly 6 months. Leo had only been in kindergarten for a little over a year. This meant Victor and Chloe had started their affair almost as soon as she'd begun her internship. The photos depicted them laughing, holding hands, arms linked, kissing passionately. Sickening parody of young lovers. The revulsion was so strong I felt physically ill. How could Victor be so depraved, carrying on with a student, barely out of her teens? He had shown absolutely no regard for Leo's well-being, for the potential scandal. He didn't deserve to be a father. Ethan's fury was palpable over the phone. He urged me to file for divorce immediately. I didn't respond, merely saying I needed time to think. He hung up, frustrated with my apparent inaction. Divorce was inevitable, of course. But before that, Victor would pay. I owed it to my parents' memory. At my parents' grave, I placed a bouquet of their favorite lilies. Their smiling faces looked out from the photograph on the headstone. As gentle and loving as they'd always been in life. I hadn't allowed myself to show any emotion these past few days, but looking at their picture, the dam finally broke. Tears streamed down my face, starting as quiet sobs and then erupting into heartbroken wails. I wanted to purge all the pain, all the betrayal. Victor had been a foundling, abandoned on our doorstep as an infant. My mother, who had struggled for years to conceive, had taken him in. My parents never formally adopted him but raised him as their own, even giving him a separate household registration. Then, when Victor was 5, perhaps because they'd finally relaxed, or for some other inexplicable reason, my mother became pregnant with me. Though my parents cherished me, they never neglected Victor. They treated him as their own son, careful not to show favoritism, fearing he might feel displaced. Victor and I grew up together like siblings. My affection for him was naturally deeper than for anyone else. He, however, had always been somewhat aloof, reserved. My mother would comfort me, saying he was just shy, outwardly cool but warm-hearted underneath. And he was, in his own way, protective. If I threw a tantrum, he wouldn't scold me harshly. If other children bullied me, he'd step in, a silent guardian. My mother had told me about Victor's origins early on. So, when I first started developing romantic feelings, they were, inevitably, for him. My parents hadn't died in that tragic car accident. Perhaps my life would have taken a different path. Perhaps I would have married someone else. I had just graduated from university. My parents were on their way to my graduation ceremony when the accident happened. By the time I reached the hospital, My father was already gone. My mother was fading fast. I was so devastated I couldn't even speak. With her last breath, my mother had taken my hand and Victor's, pressed them together, and whispered to him, "Vivian, please take care of Vivian." I'd fainted from grief. Victor, along with my uncles, handled all the funeral arrangements. I spent my days in a haze of tears. My world had collapsed. It was Victor who slowly, patiently, pulled me out of the abyss of grief. And then, terrified of losing him too, I'd asked him to marry me. 10 years had passed. Our son was now 4. The peaceful, stable life I thought we had built was shattered, destroyed by Victor's own hands. My faith in him, the bedrock of my existence, had crumbled the moment I saw him with Chloe. Whispering to my parents' spirits, I said, "Mom, Dad, I truly, truly hate him now." The depth of my past love was now matched only by the intensity of my hatred. Returning from the cemetery, my resolve hardened. I called Ethan. "I'm taking over the company," I told him. "After all, I'm the majority shareholder." I held dual degrees in economics and management and business English. My parents had always harbored a secret hope that I would one day inherit and run the family business. But after their accident, I'd been too consumed by grief to even consider it. Victor had stepped in, managing the company alongside me, though in reality he took the lead. Ethan had voiced his concerns back then, and my uncles had also subtly warned me to be cautious. I hadn't paid much attention, assuming their reservation stemmed from less frequent interaction with Victor. I, on the other hand, had believed I knew him best. After Leo was born, my focus shifted entirely to motherhood and household matters. I was still involved in major annual projects and monthly reviews, so I had a general grasp of the company's operations. Major decisions still required my approval, but more often than not, I trusted Victor's judgment and rarely intervened directly. Thank goodness I'd never completely abandoned my studies. I'd even completed an online master's in financial management, thinking it might be useful if the company ever faced difficulties, allowing me to support Victor. And thank goodness Victor, believing me to be easily manipulated, had never brazenly pressured me to transfer my shares to him. In his eyes, I was utterly dependent on him. These very factors now formed the foundation of my return. Ability and authority were essential to command respect. Victor had occupied my position for too long. He'd likely forgotten that he had no biological ties to the Price family, no inherent claim to its legacy. Now I was here to reclaim what was rightfully mine. When Victor saw me at the morning board meeting, seated in the chairman's position, his expression was a mixture of shock and barely concealed stiffness. He took a seat to my left. I hadn't mentioned my intention to come to the office when he left for work that morning. A few of the shareholders looked surprised by my presence. Nominally, I was the largest shareholder, but Victor had been my proxy for so long that my appearance was a novelty. Most, however, remained composed. I had given them a week's notice. These were the uncles and aunts who had helped my parents build the company from scratch. My parents had laid the groundwork for me to inherit, but with Victor largely at the helm, they'd had little opportunity to guide me. Now, knowing I was ready to take charge of my parents' legacy, they were visibly pleased. Before even officially resuming my duties, I began drafting a proposal to acquire a smaller company we'd collaborated with for years. For days, I survived on less than 4 hours of sleep, careful not to show any fatigue in front of Leo. This was a battle and I had to win. Fortunately, when I presented the proposal at the meeting, it received majority support. The dissenting voices belonged to Victor's loyalists. They were insignificant. Who would follow a usurper indefinitely? They would soon realize where their best interests lay. But I didn't care. The power of my position was now making itself felt. Victor finally broke his silence. "Vivian, don't you think this is a bit aggressive?" I laughed softly, my gaze unwavering. "Oh, you think so?" He said no more, but his expression betrayed his agitation. Of course it was aggressive from his perspective. If we acquired that company, his opportunities for personal gain would significantly diminish. There was another reason too. I hadn't managed the company actively for years. I needed to establish my authority quickly. This was my chance to earn their respect. No one wants to follow a figurehead. Furthermore, I continued, my cousin Ethan Cole will be appointed as the company's chief financial officer. I trust everyone will offer him their full support. Ethan's capabilities were well known within the company. A round of applause signaled their approval. This time Victor truly couldn't contain himself. He shot to his feet, turned, and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. He was genuinely furious. A cold smile touched my lips. This was only the beginning. Ignoring Victor's dramatic exit, I continued the meeting with the other shareholders and key project managers, gathering their feedback. Their assessment, a formidable successor, was a welcome validation. Only then did I return to the chairman's office. Victor was already there, his composure restored, a practiced smile on his face. Vivian, I apologize for my behavior earlier. But you know Ethan, he's never liked me. Of course I know, I thought. And frankly, you're quite unlikable. But it wasn't time to show my hand completely. I smiled back. Victor, I just thought having a family member in a key role would be helpful. It would also lighten your burden. Silence stretched between us. Then he asked, Vivian, are you here because you don't trust me to manage the company? I shook my head. How could you think that? I was simply bored at home. And seeing you work so late recently, I felt for you. I thought it was time I shared some of the responsibility. He started to speak again, but I cut him off. Victor, I said, my voice soft, I've been thinking. I want to transfer all my shares to you. After all, you've done so much for this family, for this company. I see it all. First, disbelief flickered in his eyes, then unadulterated joy. Honey, are you serious? I nodded. Of course. I've always relied on you. You're the breadwinner and I'm happy to be the beautiful wife. Isn't that a good arrangement? A knock on the door. It was the lawyer I'd summoned. Victor looked puzzled. This is the lawyer for the share transfer notarization, I explained. I've already signed. Once you sign, the contract is effective. Victor's face broke into the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all day. He moved to embrace me, but I subtly sidestepped him. This is wonderful, Vivian, he gushed. It's not about the shares, really. Between us, what's yours is mine, right? Yet he didn't refuse. He initially scrutinized the contract, but then, perhaps fearing I'd change my mind, he signed it quickly. A cold, triumphant smirk played on my lips. The lawyer was real, the contract a meticulously crafted fake. Victor's greed made him careless. He hadn't bothered to read the clauses thoroughly. The lawyer was just part of the elaborate charade. I leaned back on the sofa. So, Victor, you need to cooperate fully with Ethan. He's only trying to help you. In a little while, at the general shareholders meeting, I'll announce you as the official chairman. And then, my dear Victor, a much bigger surprise awaits you. You'd better perform well. It would be a shame to waste all my efforts. Victor, lost in his blissful anticipation, nodded eagerly. Professionals helped me audit the accounts for the past 5 years. Victor had only started embezzling assets into his own pockets in the last 2 years. He'd gone to considerable lengths to cover his tracks, so the investigation took some time. I had hired forensic accountants. Ethan was merely a decoy. A classic misdirection. The purpose of appointing Ethan was to divert Victor's attention, making it easier for the real investigation to proceed. Ethan's insider knowledge, combined with the external audit, unearthed a significant amount of Victor's illicit activities, despite his attempts to hide them. Seeing the fraudulent accounts, a chill ran down my spine. Victor was truly a wolf, a predator. He'd been secretly transferring assets for ages. If I hadn't discovered it, when I did, what good would becoming chairman have done me? I'd have inherited an empty shell. He'd harbored ill intentions towards me for a long time. Those doctored accounts, those shady dealings, if discovered, the liability would fall squarely on me, as the company's legal representative was still in my name. So his reluctance to have me transfer shares wasn't just because he thought I was easy to control. He'd been setting up a two-pronged strategy to benefit himself, no matter what. Of course, all this was done in secret. And during the 2 months of auditing and investigating Victor, I was also engaged in another endeavor. That endeavor was to befriend Chloe Hall. Naturally, I wasn't being magnanimous, nor was I stooping to conquer or pathetically trying to win Victor back by befriending his mistress. My motive was simple. I wanted to teach Chloe a lesson. When I told Ethan, he repeatedly asked if I was sure I wanted to do this. I was absolutely certain. I had to do this to even slightly appease the inferno of rage burning within me. For Chloe, a girl fresh out of the ivory tower, I could concede that she might have naively fallen for an older, mature man unknowingly, becoming the other woman. But that wasn't Chloe. She knew Victor had a family, a son. Yet she reveled in what she perceived as their great love story, while Victor, in his arrogance, saw it as a testament to his irresistible charm. I, however, saw it differently. A love built on the wreckage of another's family. Could such a self-serving affection truly last? I was eager to find out. Moreover, during my investigation into Chloe, I discovered a rather amusing fact. Her pregnancy was fake. This further proved that her intentions with Victor were far from disinterested. She clearly wanted to be officially instated. Under the pretext of thanking her for her care of Leo, I invited Chloe for a spa day. She initially declined, but eventually my persistence wore her down. Later, using the excuse of needing a shopping companion, I invited her out a few more times. Gradually we became friends, sharing confidences. I told her about Victor's past, how my parents had taken him in. I recounted the years Victor had been by my side, the moment he'd asked me to marry him. Then, looking earnest, I confided in Chloe. I have a feeling my husband has been hiding something from me lately. Chloe's smile was strained. You're probably just overthinking things. I spoke to her with carefully feigned sincerity. You and your boyfriend are still in the honeymoon phase, aren't you? Judging by your happiness, it must be so. When my husband and I first got married, I was just like you. Ignoring her increasingly unnatural smile, I fixed her with a steady gaze. I've thought about it. If my husband and I couldn't make it work, then he probably couldn't make it work with anyone else. Chloe's voice held a hint of provocation. What makes you say that? I laughed softly. A man who can betray someone he's known for nearly 30 years. Who else would he truly care about? Besides, I added, letting my words sink in, everything my husband has, he got from my family. He wouldn't be foolish enough to give all that up, would he? Chloe was visibly stunned by my words. This was exactly the effect I wanted. I needed her to understand the unlikelihood of Victor abandoning his comfortable life, his established position for her. Chloe's claims of being only for love were, in my opinion, utter nonsense. Victor hadn't projected the image of a successful elite. Would she still have fallen so head over heels for him? I wanted to plant a seed of doubt in her mind about Victor's feelings for her. A man who could discard such a long-standing relationship likely loved himself above all others. I then steered the conversation to other topics. Some things couldn't be rushed. I didn't expect my words to have an immediate effect, but the seed of suspicion was sown. My next step was to wait and watch. After that, I took Chloe to an equestrian club a few times. The dashing figures on horseback, the casual display of wealth. Chloe was captivated. She almost forgot her pregnant status. And here, coincidentally, Chloe met Julian Chase, the owner of a startup company. Julian was 25. His family having made their fortune in boutique hotels. His father had capitalized on the prime era for private enterprise, and their hotel chain now boasted over a dozen properties. Julian himself was a sea turtle, an overseas returnee, having completed his bachelor's and master's degrees in art appreciation abroad before returning to help with the family business. He was a bona fide rich second-generation heir, but his arts background lent him a unique, sophisticated aura. And one more thing. After meeting Chloe once, Julian launched an extravagant, relentless courtship. Flowers, fine wines, roses, designer bags, the more ostentatious the better. It was a grand, sweeping romance. All this Chloe recounted to me, her eyes shining with an unmistakable excitement, like someone who'd found a kindred spirit. Of course, everything about Julian resonated perfectly with Chloe. As a friend, I offered Chloe some well-meaning advice. Rich second-generation types are often players, Chloe. You must be careful. Don't fall for him. Especially since you already have a boyfriend. My earnestness was so convincing I almost believed myself. Chloe too was taken in. But how could she not be moved by a handsome, dashing, wealthy young man who seemed utterly devoted to her? So, she began frequenting typical couple date spots with Julian more and more often. They were inseparable like two peas in a pod. Every girl dreams of a Prince Charming sweeping her off her feet, and Chloe believed Julian was her hero, arriving on a seven-colored cloud. With Julian in her life, Chloe naturally grew cold towards Victor. I faithfully played my role as friend, reminding Chloe to be cautious. At first, she hesitated, but later she told me she had broken up with her boyfriend. Broken up? No wonder Victor had been coming home much earlier these days. So that was the reason. Chloe proudly showed me the gifts Julian had bought her, various designer bags and clothes. Having frequented high-end establishments with him, Chloe was thoroughly convinced of Julian's status and never doubted the authenticity of his gifts. She was now walking on air, her face constantly wreathed in a blissful smile, Victor completely forgotten. But what if she lost Julian? Julian, who had appeared under my orchestration, disappeared just as conveniently. When Chloe came to me distraught, asking for Julian's whereabouts, I feigned ignorance. Her misery significantly alleviated my own suffering of the past few weeks. But Chloe, true to form, was resilient. She quickly turned around and went back to coaxing Victor. Victor, his recent gloom dispelled, began consorting with Chloe again. I wasn't worried. The real show was just beginning. I compiled 2 sets of photos. One set, featuring Chloe and Julian looking very much like a couple, I anonymously emailed to Victor. The other set, compromising pictures of Chloe and Victor, along with a formal letter of denunciation, I mailed to the dean of Chloe's university under Victor's name. Within 2 days, the photos began to have their intended effect. A man might discard a mistress, but he would never tolerate her secretly hooking up with someone else. It was a direct assault on his ego. And for an undergraduate student to be a mistress, that was a serious moral issue. Consequently, Victor was in a terrible state, figuratively seeing green with jealousy. He certainly had no mental energy to notice the professional auditors I had embedded within the company. In the surveillance footage I later reviewed, I saw Victor, once so affectionate with Chloe, screaming at her. He couldn't allow a mistress to challenge his dignity to cross his bottom line. However, because he still believed Chloe was pregnant with his child, he hadn't physically assaulted her. Chloe, too, was full of resentment towards Victor. Because of him, she'd lost her internship. Her reputation was in tatters. But she didn't dare make a scene. She was now destitute, her name ruined, entirely dependent on Victor for survival. Just as it seemed they might reconcile, I added more fuel to the fire. This time it was Chloe's medical report, clearly stating no signs of pregnancy, along with several explicit bed photos of Chloe and Julian. Seeing Victor's incandescent rage brought me immense satisfaction. He launched his own investigation and confirmed that Chloe was indeed not pregnant with his child. Finally, he couldn't restrain himself any longer and physically attacked her. So much for their great love. How utterly laughable. The day arrived when, as per our agreement, Victor was to be officially announced as chairman at the shareholders' meeting. That morning, Victor meticulously dressed, and I even gifted him a new silk tie. His eyes crinkled with a smile. This was probably the only thing that had brought him any joy recently. At the shareholders' meeting, after discussing a few new policy decisions, I spoke, my voice low but clear. There is one more matter I wish to announce. I looked at Victor's expectant, gleeful face and smiled coldly. And that is the dismissal of manager Victor Price. The transition from joyous anticipation to stunned disbelief, then to incandescent fury on Victor's face was deeply satisfying. He shot to his feet, glaring at me. On what grounds? I rose slowly, walked over to him, and slammed a thick folder onto the table in front of him. On these grounds. On the grounds of your conduct towards this company over these many years. Victor's expression was a priceless spectacle. Ethan discreetly ushered the other shareholders out of the conference room. This was now a private family matter, and they understood. Only Victor and I remained. Vivian, he hissed. It must be Ethan. He framed me. I would never do such things. I, too, once believed you incapable of such actions, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Only a truly ungrateful person would sabotage the company of the adoptive parents who raised them for so many years. Besides, this evidence was compiled by professionals, not just Ethan. Victor's face alternated between shades of pale and puce. At the time, I didn't want to. I cut him off. You want to say you didn't mean to do it? You want me to give you another chance? Is that it? Victor looked at me and nodded vigorously. I shook my head slowly. That's impossible, Victor. Any single item in this folder is enough to send you to prison. But I won't report you. Purely because I don't want my son's biological father to be a convicted criminal. As for any lingering sentiment between us, that vanished the moment you betrayed me. Victor stared at me aghast. You knew all along? I smiled faintly. Which particular transgression are you referring to? Your fraudulent accounting? Or your affair with Chloe? He was utterly stunned. I let out a disdainful laugh. This is a divorce agreement. I paused. Don't even think about not signing it. If you sign now, you get to keep whatever money is legally yours from before our major ventures. But you won't get a single cent of what belongs to me or this company, which is to say, almost everything. I leaned closer to him, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. For my parents' sake, leave this city. Disappear. And I won't pursue this further. Otherwise, I can't say what I might do. Victor glared at me with pure hatred. Vivian Price, you actually schemed to get my signature. You're ruthless. Then with a venomous scowl, he signed his name. He knew I was, in fact, being merciful. Clutching the divorce agreement, I walked towards the exit. At the door, I turned back to look at him one last time. Victor, when it comes to ruthlessness, I'm still an amateur compared to you. You deceived me for many years. You were the one who promised to marry me, and you were the one who betrayed that promise. If I hadn't discovered your schemes when I did, your cruelty towards me would have been far greater. My only regret, perhaps, is that even now, I haven't been cruel enough to you. As I left the company building, the sun was shining brightly, but there was no sense of relief in my heart, only a dull ache. He was, after all, the brother I had relied on for so many years. I didn't know how long it would take for the wounds of the past to heal, but I knew I would move forward. I had to for my son. I was his greatest protector. As for Victor and Chloe's tangled mess, I no longer cared to involve myself. Some people are merely fleeting passengers in the journey of life. You walk with them, you miss them when they're gone, but only by letting go can you continue to live well. Victor believed that even after leaving Vivian, his life wouldn't be too dire. After all, his abilities had been widely acknowledged, or so he thought. He had always felt that, despite his talent, he had been unfairly denied full control of the company simply because he wasn't blood. He was determined to gather his resources and make a comeback. However, he found himself hitting brick walls at every turn. After continuous rejections, he finally understood a bitter truth. The praise and admiration he had previously received were entirely dependent on the platform provided by Vivian's adoptive parents. Their company, under his management, was a valuable asset. Others had shown him deference because they needed access to that platform. He had mistakenly believed it was a testament to his own capabilities. Now he could only find work in small, insignificant companies where his talents were underutilized and unappreciated. Chloe, his former mistress, had reportedly already latched onto another wealthy benefactor. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Returning home from another fruitless day to a cold, dark apartment, devoid of any light or warmth, Victor knew he was paying the heavy, inescapable price for his past foolishness and profound ingratitude.